Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Now, if you ever look at your bank account and then look at your moral compass, they probably feel like they live in two completely different universes, right? But what if they don't? Today, we are unpacking a really groundbreaking academic paper published in June 2025 by the Korea Institute of Religious Economics. It explores something we literally interact with every single day, but rarely think about: the hidden structural connections between ancient religion, moral ethics, and our modern financial systems. If you've ever felt this massive disconnect between how we make money and how we make ethical choices, well, this research proves that not only are they connected, but they actually share the exact same underlying architecture. It's a fascinating, densely layered study, and I am absolutely thrilled to unravel it with you today. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the cognitive roadmap we'll use to unpack today's study. We'll start with the perceived divide between economy and ethics. Second, we'll look at the four religious logics. Third, we'll map faith and eternal life to economics. Fourth, we'll see where religion meets economic theory. And finally, we'll build a sustainable economic cycle. All right, starting with part one: economy, ethics, and religion, the perceived divide. So if you take a standard economics class today, you are probably going to be taught that capitalism and morality operate in completely different spheres. Modern capitalist economics strenuously denies that our financial models have any deep functional connection to our moral frameworks. But the paper argues that this separation, it's a complete illusion. To understand why, we really have to look at their ultimate goals. The economy pursues efficiency, right? It's all about action and maximizing utility. Ethics, on the other hand, pursues justice, focusing on institutions and rights. They seem totally at odds. In the real world, massive corporate layoffs might be incredibly efficient for boosting a company's stock price, but they often feel entirely unjust to the workers. But this study argues that these two forces actually have a long-term, inverse functional relationship. They're inextricably linked. The researcher uses an absolutely brilliant metaphor to describe this. Economy and ethics are like Janus, the two-faced Roman god. They appear simultaneously, but they're looking in completely opposite directions. You simply cannot have one face without the other. They are two faces of the exact same entity. So what actually connects them? Well, according to the paper, the thing that sits in the middle, literally the neck that turns these two faces and mediates between efficiency and justice, is religion, or political virtue. Religion acts as the anchor, establishing what the good actually is, which then allows ethics to build the rules and economics to take the action. Now, what's really interesting here is how, when you map these forces out visually, with economics in blue, ethics in teal, and religion in purple, a fascinating overlap emerges. You can clearly see how they pull in totally different directions. Economics is leaning heavily toward efficiency and freedom, ethics is pulling toward justice and institutional rights, and religion is anchoring virtue and being. But look closely at how they intersect. They all share this identical, integrated architecture of action, institution, and being. They aren't just isolated bubbles floating around. They are a tightly woven singular system. Moving on to part two, the four religious logics, the source code of belief. If religion is the primary mediator in this economic structure, how does it actually function? The research beautifully categorizes Eastern and Western religious thought into four distinct repeating mathematical formulas. Think of these as the literal source code of human belief systems. The first logical quadrant is Confucianism. Its formula is absolute clarity. X is X, and negative X is negative X. It emphasizes very clear distinctions and duties. A ruler must act as a ruler, a minister must act as a minister. To put this into modern corporate terms, a CEO must act like a CEO, and an intern must act like an intern. It pursues absolute social clarity, essentially saying you know what you know, and you do not know what you do not know. It's a highly practical, utilitarian logic, perfectly designed to maintain strict social order. Next up, we have Taoism, which operates on a fascinatingly different logic. Its formula is a total paradox. X is negative X, and negative X is X. This is a mutually transformative worldview. It teaches that the strongest thing is actually the weakest thing, kind of like how soft water can erode solid rock over time. The friend is the foe, and the foe is the friend. If you think about this in terms of market competition, your biggest adversary in business is actually the exact force that drives you to innovate and become stronger. Taoism follows the Tao of non-action, prioritizing extreme individual freedom and a natural, spontaneous flow, which is basically a laissez-faire approach to life. Then we move to Buddhism, which neutralizes the equation entirely. Its formula is X is neither X nor negative X. According to this study, this represents the ultimate middle way worldview. It's based on something called dependent origination. Simply put, nothing exists in a vacuum. A massive factory only exists because of the workers, the roads, the raw materials pulled from nature, and the consumers. Because of that, absolute, isolated individual ownership is just an illusion. Everything is a cycle, so this logic heavily emphasizes fairness, interconnectedness, and the breakdown of rigid property lines. Finally, rounding this out, we have Western religion. Its overarching formula is incredibly comprehensive. X is everything. This is a worldview centered entirely on a covenantal relationship between God and humanity. The driving force here is universal love, pursuing the community over the individual, and spirit over matter. We actually see this exact source code running in the background of modern philanthropy and our community safety nets. It's a powerful logic designed to bind people together into a shared system of spiritual and material wealth. Let's move to Section 3, Faith, Eternal Life, and Economics, Mapping the Values. So, what does this all mean for us? How do these 4 abstract mathematical formulas translate into how people actually buy, sell, and live? Well, the paper argues that each religion's specific view of eternal life directly dictates its economic values, and this brilliantly illustrates that connection. When we map these 4 religions across 2 axes, individual versus community on one side, and present-oriented versus afterlife-oriented on the other, a really clear pattern emerges. Notice how Western religion sits firmly in the community and afterlife quadrant, completely driven by the eternal life of the soul. Down in the bottom left, Confucianism is highly present-oriented and community-focused. Taoism is present-oriented too, but heavily focused on the individual. Buddhism sits up at the top right, focusing on the individual's ethical rebirth through transmigration. Their spiritual goals literally map out their economic behaviors. All right, Section 4, Religion meets Economic Theory, the Fractal Structure. Get ready, because this is the major aha moment of the entire explainer. What happens when ancient belief meets Wall Street? The researcher made this incredible discovery. These religious traditions map almost eerily perfectly onto the modern schools of economic thought that dictate our global markets today. Seriously, think about it. The ancient Taoist masters advocating for non-action are fundamentally preaching the exact same logic as a modern neoclassical libertarian economist, advocating for a hands-off, free market approach based on use value. Confucianism, with its laser focus on strict public order and utility, aligns perfectly with Keynesianism. It drives sign value, which is kind of like buying a luxury watch not just to tell time, but to signal your social status to the group. Buddhism, emphasizing fairness and the idea that nothing exists independently, connects directly to classical and Marxist thought, focusing on exchange value. And Western religion, with its focus on universal love and broad sharing, reflects institutionalist economics and communitarianism, driven by symbolic value. The researcher concludes that this is a true fractal structure. Now, if you're not familiar, a fractal is a pattern that looks the exact same close up as it does from miles away. The macro perfectly reflects the micro. The way an individual views their soul's ultimate destination is quite literally mirrored in how modern markets value a barrel of oil or a share of stock. Without even realizing it, modern finance and ancient faith are essentially answering the exact same fundamental questions about human value, distribution, and justice. No way, right? It's all connected. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, a sustainable economic cycle, the overarching system. Let's move to and see how this builds into something bigger. Once you realize that these different religions and economic schools are really just different pieces of the same giant puzzle, you can start to see how they might work together. Let's follow a hypothetical dollar bill moving through this complete cycle. The paper argues that each religion uniquely powers a different, necessary stage of a healthy economy. First, that dollar is born out of saving and scarcity. Then it gets put to work building things during the production phase, which is driven by Confucianism's emphasis on utility and organizing society efficiently. Once wealth is actually produced, it moves to circulation, driven globally by Western religion's focus on universal love and broad community sharing. Finally, the actual distribution of that wealth is governed by Buddhism's focus on fairness and social contracts. It takes all of these logical systems working together in harmony to make an economy truly run. So why does all this matter right now? I want to read this exact quote from the research because it hits the nail on the head. A cyclic religious economic view offers an alternate paradigm, a transition from the myth of infinite growth to sustainable circulation. When you look at your grocery bill right now, or you feel that sinking anxiety about rolling market crashes, ethical vacuums, or climate change, that is exactly what an economic system divorced from its moral framework feels like. By reintegrating these ancient blueprints, we could actually shift away from the impossible, exhausting myth that economies can just grow infinitely and move towards a model of sustainable circulation that actually serves humanity. It's a real game changer. It completely shifts how we view the market. It isn't just a ticker of random numbers on a screen. It's a living reflection of our deepest ethical and spiritual architectures. So now that you've seen the hidden code behind the global economy, how does recognizing this cyclic architecture change the way you participate in modern capitalism today? Are you prioritizing efficiency or justice? And which of those four logics is really driving your decisions? Something to think about next time you check your bank account. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, remember to look a little closer at the hidden architecture all around you.